Sai Ram. Welcome to Shri Sathya Sai Loka Seva Gurukulam online classes. Today we are going to continue with the chapter Nutrition in Animals. This is the fourth part of this chapter. Let's get started. Learning objectives. Recapitulation, small intestine, absorption in small intestine, large intestine, diarrhea, and tracing the journey of food. Dear students, we have already studied about our buccal cavity. So what all is present inside our buccal cavity? We have the teeth, the salivary glands, and the tongue. We studied that teeth, they help in chewing the food and breaking it down into smaller pieces. Then the saliva acts on the starch present in our food. What is starch? Starch is basically a type of carbohydrate. So the digestion of carbohydrates gets started in our mouth. Then the tongue, it helps in mixing the food and the saliva properly. This is what we have learned. And we also know how many teeth are present in our buccal cavity. How many teeth are present in adults? So we adults have 32 teeth. And what about children? How many teeth do they have? So children have 20 teeth and adults have 32 teeth. So we have studied this already. Then we learnt that the food then after goes into the esophagus. Now esophagus is a long tubular pipe and there is a certain wave-like movement in the wall of esophagus that helps the food to move down. And then the food enters into our stomach. Now what happens in stomach? We studied that 3 types of gastric secretions are released. And what are those secretions? They are the mucus, hydrochloric acid, and the digestive juices. So the hydrochloric acid or HCl, it kills the bacteria present in our food. So it will kill the bacteria. And what is the function of mucus? So as HCl, it is an acid. So this acid can damage the wall of stomach. So mucus, it protects the lining of stomach. So the purpose of mucus is to protect the lining of stomach from the HCl. Then the third secretion was digestive juices. What do digestive juices do? What did we study? What is their role? The digestive juices, they help in the breakdown of protein into simpler substances. So the digestion of carbohydrate, that is starch, started in our mouth. Then the digestion of proteins, it starts in our stomach. Now let's start the new topic, small intestine. So once the digestion is completed in stomach, then the food will enter into our small intestine. The small intestine is a highly coiled and it is about 7.5 meters long. So you can see in this diagram, this small intestine, it is highly coiled. And can you imagine how long it is? It's 7.5 meters long. The food gets digested in the small intestine with the help of certain secretions. Now let's see from where do these secretions come. It receives these secretions from the liver, the pancreas, and the wall of small intestine. So over here you can see this is the liver. Okay. So the small intestine, it will receive its secretions from the liver. Okay. So these secretions go into small intestine. Then this organ over here, this gland over here is the pancreas. Okay, so this is the pancreas. So its secretions also go into the small intestine. Okay, so the secretions from liver and the pancreas, they go into this small intestine. And the third one is the walls of small intestine. So the walls of these small intestine, they also secrete certain secretions. Okay, from the wall also certain secretions come out. So all these three, the three of them help in the digestion of food in the small intestine. The liver is a reddish brown gland situated in the upper part of the abdomen on the right hand side. So liver is present on the right hand side. The liver is the largest gland in the body. So it's an important point to remember. Which is the largest gland in our body? Liver is the largest gland in the body. The pancreas is a large cream-colored gland located just below the stomach. So the pancreas is located just below the stomach. Now the secretions of the liver, the pancreas, and the wall of small intestine are, so what are these secretions? So the secretion from liver is bile. So what is the secretion of liver called? It is the bile juice that is stored in a sac called gallbladder. So over here you can see in this diagram liver, right? And then you can see this sac-like structure called gallbladder. So the liver, it will produce and secrete bile, right? So bile is made over here, is secreted over here, and then from here you can see this tubular structure. Now the bile gets stored over here into this structure called gallbladder. Now I hope you can see it over here. The bile is secreted from the liver, and then this bile gets stored in this sac-like structure called gallbladder. And now from this gallbladder, this bile enters into small intestine. So this area is the entrance of small intestine. So the bile, it is secreted from liver, then it is stored in the gallbladder, and then later gallbladder will slowly release this bile and then it enters into small intestine. Now let's see what is the secretion of pancreas. Pancreas secretes pancreatic juice. So over here you can see pancreas and it will release pancreatic juice. So the pancreatic juice also enters the small intestine from here, right? And the walls of small intestine, they secrete intestinal juice. So I hope it is clear. Liver secretes bile. That bile gets stored in a sac-like structure called gallbladder. From gallbladder, this bile then enters into the small intestine. The pancreas, it secretes pancreatic juice, which is sent into the small intestine then. And the walls of small intestine, this secrete, its secretion is called intestinal juice. Now, let's have a look at the roles of these secretions. What are their roles? So, firstly, the liver. So, we know that liver secretes bile juice. And the role of it is to digest fats. So bile helps in the secretion or in the digestion of fats in our small intestine. So you can see over here that the digestion of carbohydrates, it started in mouth. Then the digestion of proteins started in the stomach. And the digestion of fats gets started in the small intestine. And bile is helping in the digestion of fats in our small intestine. Then pancreas, we know it secretes pancreatic juice, and this pancreatic juice, it acts on carbohydrates, fats and proteins. So whatever carbohydrates, fats and proteins are now left which were not digested previously now get digested by the pancreatic juice. Now the walls of small intestine, they secrete intestinal juice and it completes the digestion of partly digested food in the lower part of small intestine. So whatever is left, that all gets digested in the lower part of small intestine by the intestinal juice. So bile helps in the digestion of fats, while pancreatic juices, they act on all fats, carbohydrates and proteins. So they help in digesting all these things. And whatever is now this partially digested food, whatever is left for further digestion, the digestion gets completed in the lower part of small intestine when the intestinal juice is secreted. So intestinal juice, now it completes the process of digestion. As the digestion finishes in the small intestine, the end products are as following. So I hope this thing is clear that the digestion of all the nutrients present in our food gets completed in the small intestine. Now the digestion is complete. So let's have a look at the end products of digestion. So carbohydrates, they basically get converted into simple sugar, for example, glucose. So the end product of carbohydrate in digestion is glucose. Then fats, the end product of fats in digestion is fatty acids and glycerol. The protein, the end product of proteins is amino acids. So students, the digestion is now complete in our small intestine. So what now? Now these digested food material like glucose, it needs to reach all the other body parts. Why? Because glucose, with the breakdown of glucose in the different cells of all the parts of the body will release energy. So all the cells of our body need glucose to get energy. Then this fatty acid and glycerol needs to reach all the cells of the body, because then the fatty acids will be stored in the form of fat in our body. Then amino acids also need to reach all the cells of our body to help to make protein in our body. So amino acids help in the formation of protein, DNA and other things in our body. So all these things need to reach various locations, different parts of our body. And how will that happen? How will glucose, fatty acids, glycerol, amino acids produced in these end products made in the small intestine reach all the other parts of the body? So let's see. So the digested food can now pass into blood vessels in the wall of intestine. This process is called absorption. So now all the digested food like glucose, fatty acids, amino acids, now what will happen? They will enter into the blood vessels of the small intestine. And this process is called absorption. What is absorption? The digested food is now passed into the blood vessels of small intestine. And this is known as absorption. The inner wall of small intestine have thousands of finger-like outgrowths, and these are called villi. So you can see in this diagram over here, there are these finger-like outgrowths, and these are called villi. Let's study in a little more detail about these villi. What is the role of villi? So the villi, they increase the surface area for absorption of food. So now we know that in the small intestine, after digestion, the food needs to be absorbed so that it can be sent to all the cells of the body through blood vessels. So you can see over here in this diagram, these finger-like outgrowths in the walls of our small intestine, these are villi. Now, each villus has a network of thin and small blood vessels close to its surface. You can see in this diagram, you can see these very thin blood capillaries, and the digested food, now it will enter these blood capillary network. The surface of villi absorbs the digested food material. So over here you can see the villi, it has a lot of blood capillary network and blood vessels. Now the absorbed food substances are transported via blood vessels to different organs of the body, where they are used to build complex substances such as the proteins required by the body, and this is called assimilation. So what has happened? The food got digested, then the food was absorbed by the blood vessels in our small intestine, and villi helped in it by increasing the surface area. Now through blood vessels, the digested food has reached all the cells and organs of our body. Now those organs, those cells will utilize that food, and that process of utilizing that food, the process of utilizing that digested food is known as assimilation. Then in the cells, glucose breaks down with the help of oxygen into carbon dioxide, water, and energy is released. So you can see in this equation, glucose in the presence of oxygen produces carbon dioxide, water, and energy. The food that remains undigested and unabsorbed now enters into the large intestine. So we have studied the food got digested in the small intestine. The food was absorbed, sent to all the body parts. Then the food got assimilated. So what is the role of large intestine then? So whatever was the undigested food, only the undigested food is sent into the large intestine. The large intestine is a wider and shorter than small intestine. So the large intestine, it is wider, but it is shorter than the small intestine, as you can see in this diagram. It is about 1.5 meters in length. And do you remember how long was small intestine? It was 7.5 meters long, while the large intestine is 1.5 meters long. Its function is to absorb water and some salts from the undigested food material. So what is its role? It absorbs water and some salt from the undigested food. The remaining waste passes into the rectum and remains there in semi-solid feces. The fecal matter is removed through the anus from time to time, and this is called egestion. So the removal of fecal matter from time to time through the anus, this process is called egestion. So in today's class, we have learned about the process of absorption, right? And then we learned about the process of assimilation, and now the third one is egestion. What was absorption? Absorption was when the digested food was passed on into the blood vessels of small intestine. That was absorption. Then what is assimilation? Assimilation is the utilization of the digested food that has been, the utilization of the digested food by the cells and the organs of our body. And what is egestion? It is the removal of fecal matter through anus. So that is egestion. Now some facts about diarrhea. Firstly, what exactly is diarrhea? So sometimes you may have experienced the need to pass some watery stools frequently. So this condition is called diarrhea. Sometimes you need to go to the washroom quite often and the stools are quite watery and you have to go and pass out that watery stools quite often, and this condition is known as diarrhea. What causes diarrhea? It may be caused by infection, food poisoning, or egestion. But we should not take this disease lightly, because diarrhea is very common in India, and particularly among children it is common, and sometimes it can even be fatal. It can even be deadly. So we should not ignore it. So what should we do when someone gets diarrhea? So there's a solution called oral rehydration solution. So even before you even go to a doctor, the patient should be given some plenty of boiled water. Then that boiled water should be cooled. Once the water is cooled, then you can add a pinch of salt and sugar into it. And the patient can drink that solution. So what we did, we boiled some water, then we cooled that water, we added a pinch of sugar and salt into it. So this solution, the simple solution, is known as the oral rehydration solution. And anyone suffering from diarrhea needs to be given to it. Even before you consult a doctor, just give this to the patient. Why do we give this solution? Because during diarrhea, a lot of water is lost from our body, a lot of mineral salts are lost from the body. So it helps the body to remain rehydrated. As I told you earlier, diarrhea should not be neglected because there is excessive loss of water and salts from our body during diarrhea. And under severe conditions, it can be fatal, it can be deadly. So we should not neglect it. We should show ourselves to doctor once in case we have diarrhea, and we should take the oral rehydration solution if we have diarrhea. Moving ahead. Now we have completed this process of digestion in our body, and the digested food has gone to all parts of the body and the remaining waste has been ejected out. So now let's trace the journey of food from the very beginning till the end. So the journey of food in our body starts in the buccal cavity. What happens in the buccal cavity? The teeth, they help in chewing the food and they help in breaking it down into smaller pieces. Then the salivary glands, it secretes saliva. Digestion of starch also starts in the buccal cavity. Then where does the food go? Yes, where does it go? It goes into the esophagus. Then from there it enters the in the stomach. In the stomach, the inner lining secretes the mucus, hydrochloric acid and the digestive juices. Digestive juice over here starts the digestion of proteins. Then from the stomach, the food enters the small intestine. Secretions from the liver, the pancreas and the intestinal wall complete the digestion of all components of food. So the process of digestion completes in the small intestine. Then what? Then the digested food is absorbed in the blood vessels. So the digested food gets absorbed by the blood vessels in the small intestine. Then the undigested food. Where does the undigested food go? Into the large intestine. So from the small intestine, the digested food is absorbed by the blood vessels, and these blood vessels will circulate this digested food to all parts of the body, while the undigested food goes into the large intestine. In the large intestine, water and salts from undigested food are absorbed. Then this undigested food material from large intestine goes into the rectum. The rectum will store this undigested food material, and then the undigested food material through anus is expelled out. The process of egestion takes place. So this is the journey of our food inside our body. I hope now you understand and now you clearly know what is the journey of the food inside our body. Now let's try some exercise to check our understanding. The largest gland in human body is, what is the largest gland? Liver. The inner wall of small intestine has many finger-like outgrowths called, so what are in the inner wall of small intestine we had studied? There are finger-like outgrowths that help in absorption of food, and we studied that those outgrowths have a lot of blood capillaries, a network of blood capillary is there in it. What is it called? It is the villi. Water from the undigested food is absorbed mainly in the dash. What is it? I'm sure you know it. It's the large intestine. Gallbladder temporarily stores dash. Which secretion does gallbladder store? It is the bile. And which gland secretes bile? It is the liver. So liver secretes bile, which is stored in the gallbladder. Fat is completely digested in the dash. Where does the digestion of fat takes place? I'm sure you know it. It's the small intestine. Another exercise. Which part of the digestive canal is involved in the following? So absorption of food. Where does absorption of food take place? I'm sure you know it. It's the small intestine. Now, in which part does the chewing of food take place? I know you know it. It's very easy. The buccal cavity and the teeth help in chewing the food. Killing of bacteria. It's the stomach. So we had studied, right? The hydrochloric acid which is secreted kills the bacteria in the food in our stomach. Now, complex digestion of food. So where does the complex digestion of food occur? So we had seen that in the small intestine, various secretions are secreted, right? And they help in this complex digestion of food. Because if you see in our buccal cavity, only starch is getting digested. In our stomach, only protein is getting digested. While in the intestine, all the kinds of nutrients are getting digested. So complex digestion of food happens in the small intestine. Then the formation of feces, where does it take place? In the large intestine. Now, okay, I'm moving ahead. Okay, this is another exercise. Match the function to the structure on the left. So the first structure is the salivary gland. What is the function of this structure? So yes, salivary glands, they help in saliva secretion. Then what is the function of stomach? Try to find out from these options on the right. Yes, in the stomach, acid is released. Now, what is the function of liver? We know that liver secretes bile. So, bile juice secretion is the function of liver. What is the function of rectum? Storage of undigested food. Moving on to small intestine. The function of small intestine is the digestion is completed in this area. So that's the main thing that happens in small intestine, completion of digestion. And in large intestine, the main function of large intestine, what is it? It is absorption of water. Moving ahead, meaning of our food prayer. So students, all over the world, in traditional cultures, people pray before they have their food. They thank God for the food that He has provided. In our culture too, we pray before we eat our food. And there is this one particular prayer, this one beautiful prayer that we chant before eating our food. And Sri Sathya Sai Baba once reiterated the meaning of this prayer. And he said that when we have the food firstly it is Brahman, the divine. And one more thing, that the food that is digested, it is digested by the divine which resides within us. And that divine digests everything, even the impurities present in that food. So the divine within us is taking care of us, is nurturing us. And this is what Sri Sathya Sai Baba, he explained the meaning of our food prayer in the year 1993. So this is all for today. Thank you so much. Om Shri Sai Ram.